Hey Atlas, check out this French model. No, I'm talking about Codestral. This is a large language model. We could probably use this to automate the commenting of our Power Query. All right, anyways, in today's video, I want to show you how to leverage GitHub Models to comment your Power Query code. All right, as always, don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel so you can stay up to date on all the new features and training we'll be putting out in the coming weeks. And with that, in prior videos, I touched on the concept of separating the deterministic work that you can do in GitHub versus the agentic piece. And with tokens being the currency of the realm, the idea is that we really want to try to use as much of the deterministic aspect of GitHub Actions as possible, but then hand it off to the agentic part when we need to, or the large language model when we need to finish a certain task that we really can't do deterministically. So today, I want to show you a concept using GitHub Models. Now, this isn't a cloud agent. This isn't using GitHub Copilot. This is another large language or AI feature that is built into GitHub. So up on my screen here, I've got the website here called GitHub Models. Now, if this is the first time you're ever using this on a private repo or your own personal repo, if you go to settings, so I just went to settings here, and there'll be a button called Models. You can enable that. And at that point, what will happen is a new button up here will appear that you can click on. Now, for enterprise users, your organization owner or your enterprise administrator will need to enable that as well. At the enterprise level, there is a lot more features on which models you can turn on, which ones you can turn off, and other capabilities. But we're going to operate with the idea that it has been turned on and we have access to most of the models. Now, when I go and click on the Models button, what I'm introduced to is this kind of overview. And the idea is that you can use these models to create prompts. And these prompts are what you're going to insert into what would normally be the deterministic components of your GitHub Actions, and then add the agentic or large language model or AI component to your work. Now, I'm doing this from a GitHub Actions perspective, but you're going to see as I walk through this demonstration that pretty much you can execute this through a CLI in any sort of scenario. So it doesn't have to be GitHub Actions. This could be running through an app, through some sort of function call, maybe an Azure Function app. But we're going to stay with the concept of Power BI development. I want to make sure that when I am doing Power BI development, I can leverage this model to do certain work. And in this case, let's talk about one of the things that we really dislike doing as Power BI developers, but is important to maintainability, and that is commenting code. Now, if I was to open up one of these models that I have here, one of the things that I think we all kind of struggle with is putting comments and renaming these steps. And when I mean that by comments, you can right click, go to properties, and add in a description, or even change the name. Hit OK, and then you'll see when I hover over it, the description has been added from the comment, but I also changed the step name. Now, this is really helpful when you're working with a model when you've got maybe quite a few merges and you're trying to figure out what exactly am I trying to accomplish with that step. And every time you click on those steps, it's processing, which takes up time. It's a lot easier if I can just kind of peruse or just review the name of the step and quickly get to where I need to make an update or understand what I need to fix. But always commenting, whether it's Power BI, Python, C#, JavaScript, it's always an afterthought because it's not necessarily visible to your customer. But in the long run, it's important because it makes it easier to keep the semantic model maintained. So what if we let large language models do the commenting for us, such that we could have a GitHub action go through the TIMDL files deterministically that we want to run through the large language model, and then ask the large language model to do the commenting, and then create a PR for us to be able to merge into our code. So that way, maybe we have a PR that comes up, we can say right before the PR, let's add the comments in, keep it maintainable. So how do we do that? Well, if I go back to the model here, this models area for the repo, there is this prompt area. And when I have my models set up, I can create a new prompt. And I have a choice of using some of the out-of-the-box GitHub provided models. Now, if you've ever worked with Azure Foundry, you'll see that this looks very similar. And knowing that GitHub and Microsoft are both the same company, is probably using Azure Foundry as the backend. But you can also bring your own model, which I won't show you today, but I want to use a model that we talked about here in the beginning, which is Codestral. Codestral is a model based out of, I believe, France, a company that is working on models to advance code development. So we're not looking at OpenAI today or Claude. There is other code models out there, and one of the ones that my teams have been looking at is Codestral, because it's pretty good at making updates to code. So you can pick a model, give it a system prompt. The system prompt is kind of the behavior that you will put in place, kind of the background, kind of administrative, setting the role that you want this prompt to run under. Remember, a system prompt, and when you're prompting, you're kind of setting what the scenario that this large language model needs to operate under. And then you have this idea of a user prompt, which is really the specific instructions to say, all right, you're assuming this role, now do X, Y, and Z. And you can use these curly brackets as placeholders for passing in parameters. So in our scenario with commented code, we could be passing in the TIMDL and asking it to update the Power Query within that TIMDL. All right, so I'm going to go back and open up one of the prompts, which I will share in the YouTube description. Anytime you have a .prompt.yaml file, that will be exposed anywhere in your repository. This will be exposed in the prompt interface. So if I click on it, you see I've already got a set of system prompts. I've picked Codestral, and I have a system prompt or a user prompt that has already been set up. Again, if you've seen prior videos, I've tried to follow a pseudolang format that has made it so that I get more of a consistent output in the prompts that I do in our work. So now that I have that input, I can click on a variable. I'm just going to paste a example of a TIMDL file, hit save, and then I can actually test this in my interface here, just clicking the run button. And you'll see it's running right now. And now it's outputting the results. And where I didn't have comments or name changes in the step names here, you can see that it's added that in there. And what you'll typically do is make sure that you can use this to test kind of different files, different inputs, and really make sure that your prompt is in a good state. Now, the nice thing is if you make changes to the prompts, it gets committed to source control. So this is really nice because not only are you committing your sample model or your models, your semantic models to source control in your reports, you're also keeping the prompts that are driving the agentic work or the large language model work with the repository. So if let's say that prompt, a minor change ends up causing an issue, you can always roll back to a prior version. Now let's take a look at when I save this prompt, what is actually stored. So if I make a change to it, I can commit those changes, and I'm going to go to the code where I've stored this. I'm going to go to prompts. I'm going to click on the prompt itself, and you will see that it's got an area for the system, an area for the role. So the same text that I showed you in the interface, it's storing that in YAML. And then near the bottom, it actually identifies the model and the model parameters. Now you can, depending on which model you're working with, you can add parameters like temperature, some other parameters as well. They're all defined in the GitHub Models documentation. All right, now we've got this prompt. How do we take advantage of it? Well, you can use the GitHub CLI to call this prompt and pass in the parameters of input, in this case the TIMDL, in a GitHub action. Now, I've provided this example, but I want to take a look at this real quick. If I go to my GitHub.github, go to my workflows and comment TIMDL, I've got a workflow here that will take inputs where I can pick which model I want to have it do the work on, or a specific TIMDL file I want to do the work on. Again, we're wanting to save on cost here, so we can be very prescriptive of when we're going to hand this off to the large language model to do the work. So that's the input. I'll show you what that looks like when we actually run this. Give it the permissions. This is the typical GitHub Actions workflow. And then what this is doing is it's going to look for the specific TIMDL files in the definitions folder and the expressions.timdl. There are other TIMDL files that could be commented, but I'm really only interested in the TIMDL files that make up my model. And that's typically in expressions.timdl for anything that's disabled, and in the individual table files. Just to make sure I'm completely clear here, in the TIMDL files, I'm looking anything under definition in the table area or the expressions, because that's what's in the expressions. Any of the non-visible tables or the intermediate tables in Power Query are exposed. And in the tables, the tables that are exposed have individual TIMDL files. So those are the ones I want to run through. So again, this is all deterministically that I'm running through this. And then I am going to scroll down here, and let's go to where it says GH Models. This is the big piece of code that we're handing it off to the large language model. So we're doing GitHub Models run, pass in what the repository owner is. I'm just making sure to tell it this is the agent I want, or the type of large language model I want to use. This is the input. The input meaning this is the prompt I want you to use that I have in my repository. Take the file from the TIMDL file as my input, and then that's the output I want you to extract. And then at that point, once I've got that, I'm going to ask it to make sure and update the TIMDL files and then do a PR of that. So let's see this in action. If I go to Model Test, go to Actions, and I go to Comment TIMDL Files, I can click on that, hit Run, and then here is what the branch I can pick, the scope, the semantic model name, and specific TIMDL file. So if I want to just do in sample model, I just wanted to do the datedim file, I can do that and hit Run. And then that's going to kick off this flow to go ahead and create a new PR. Now, I've done this already. As an example, I ran this on the whole sample model. And when you can see when it's processing the Tyndall files, it's running through here, and it creates the pull request. That pull request shows the files that have changed. So all the ones in the definition tables and the expressions. And I went ahead and went to this this branch, downloaded the sample model, and opened it up locally just to take a look. And this is what we have now. So a little bit better. I could always work on the prompt a little bit further, but you can see instead of me trying to figure out what the different merges are, I now know what merges and where they occurred. I know what it's expanding. I know how it's splitting, changing, all these things I don't need to click on. And then if I hover over them, I've got the different information here as well. And then if I go to maybe data types, you'll see it's made some updates there. Whereas maybe in the past, this is the old version, you can see that if I go to Marvel Fact, it's got some of the standard steps. So this is really, really nice that GitHub provides us this capability that maybe we don't want to have everything running agentically, but we can be very prescriptive on when we hand off things to the large language model to do the work. And one of the nice things about GitHub Models as well is the pricing scheme. You know what kind of token utilization you have with the Tyndall files. You know what the prompt is. That can be a little more upfront on what you know you're going to pay for the cost. And this also gives you the ability to pick which models you want to leverage. So maybe for a certain step, you want to hand it off to Claude. Maybe for another step, you can maybe use a model that's a little cheaper but gets the job done. This is what GitHub Models allows us to do. And I hope that you find this helpful as you're thinking about building out and integrating artificial intelligence into your development workflows in Power BI and later on Fabric. This is a tool that you could take advantage of. All right, so I hope you learned something today. We went over how to leverage GitHub Models and specifically have it comment your semantic models automatically using GitHub Actions. Now in the next video, I want to go over on a little bit further on how do we actually test these prompts in a more automated fashion so that instead of us having to use the user interface to test our different prompts with the different inputs, we can automate that even further. But until then, take care.